Hey, it's Dino, and I would like to give you a quick introduction to JWT. Chapter 1. What's a JWT? JSON Web Token is defined in IETF RFC 7519. It's a way to sign or encrypt data that is represented as JSON. So there are two key parts, whether you're talking about signed or encrypted JWT. There's a payload and there's a header. Payload is the main data, the primary data, and it's just represented as a JSON. Header is metadata, or data about the encryption or signing, and it's also represented as JSON. Both are protected, so both are either signed or possibly encrypted. Any party that has a signing key can generate one of these things, and anybody with the verifying key can check the integrity of the signed or encrypted token. And then the verifying party can then rely on the data that has been verified. So it's a way to securely package up data for transmission and sending to remote parties where they can then verify that the sender generated the data, and that data can then be relied upon. JWT can contain any sort of claim. If you can represent it in JSON, then it can be included in a JWT. There's a registered set of claims with well-known names and meanings, and some of them are listed here. There are others not listed here. All registered claims are optional, so you don't need to include any registered claim in JWT in order for it to be compliant or valid. Also, a JWT can contain claims with non-registered names. Like I say, anything that can be represented in JSON can be a claim. You can make up the names. You just have to have agreement between the generator and the receiver of the JWT what those names and what the data items mean. There are two variants of JWT, signed and encrypted. Signed means the payload is integrity protected. So that means the verifier can be assured, if the signature matches, that the payload has not changed between the time the JWT was generated and the time it was read. So we can trust the integrity of the data by verifying a signed JWT. The payload in a signed JWT is readable. So while it looks like gobbledygook here, it's really just a base 64 encoded string, and it's very simple to base 64 decode those strings and recover the original JSON. But the key is that that original JSON is not verified until you verify the signature. So in a signed JWT, you have integrity protection. Encrypted JWT is a little bit different. It means the payload is secret. So in addition to integrity protection, you get privacy. And it assures that when the verifier verifies the encryption, that party will decrypt the payload, and only then we'll be able to read it. Of course, the verifier needs the decryption key. Signed JWT are significantly more widely adopted than encrypted JWT in my experience, and so when you hear people say JWT, they probably are referring to signed JWT, but your applications may have occasion to use both. A signed JWT that gives you integrity protection and an encrypted JWT that gives you privacy. So here's the structure for both signed and encrypted JWT. Very simple for signed JWT, 3 parts: header, payload, signature. The header and the payload are base 64 encoded JSONs, and the signature is just a byte stream that represents some kind of one-way hash, crypto hash of the header and the payload. With encrypted JWT, it's a little bit different. You have the header and actually an encrypted content encryption key. An initialization vector. Encrypted JWT always uses an AES algorithm, if that means anything to you, for encrypting the payload. The reason the designers chose that is because it's very fast, and the AES algorithm requires an initialization vector. So that's included. It need not be secret. And then the final piece of those 5 parts is the authentication tag. You don't really need to know, as a user of encrypted JWT, whether you're generating or verifying them and decrypting them. don't really need to know exactly how all that works. You can rely on a library that does those things for you. Anyway, that's the structure of a JWT. One more thing I'll point out is there are multiple different serialization formats for JWT. Compact serialization is the most widely used, and it is this idea where we've got strings of base 64 encoded things separated by dots. So you see that with both the signed and encrypted JWT here. There are alternative serialization formats for JWT. I almost never see them in practice. Okay, Chapter 2, Signing versus Encrypting. Let's take a deeper look. Signing, or generating a digital signature, refers to computing a cryptographic one-way hash on a data item. It's unique for that data and the key and the algorithm used. Changing any of those things, the data, the key, the algorithm, means the hash won't match. Using a signature means the receiver can verify the integrity and the source, the signer, of the data. Obviously, a program can sign any kind of data, including JSON, and what the signed JWT specification describes is just a standard way of signing JSON. So think of signed JWT as a more specific case of JWS, which is described in a different, related IETF standard, which I cited here. In signed JWT, both the header and the payload are signed and protected, and you can sort of see some pseudo code there that describes how that's done. On the right-hand side, we just show what a sample header and payload might look like. Very simple case. We do see broad adoption of JWT, especially by identity providers. Parties like Google Sign-In, Azure Active Directory, Ping, Okta, Auth0, and more. When they authenticate a user, let's say you use Google to sign in, what you get back is a JWT, an identity token. And the reason we call it an identity token is because it's a JWT that asserts claims about the specific entity of the user that has logged in or authenticated. Applications receiving that JWT can then verify the signature using usually the public key of the issuer, and then rely on the claims contained within that JWT. And that might be group associations or roles or emails, email addresses associated to the subject, and so on. There are a number of different algorithms in JWT. There are symmetric and asymmetric classes. Symmetric relies on HMAC, which is a shared secret key algorithm where both parties, the generator and the receiver, need to have possession of the same key. So that works, very convenient, but you do have the key management problem where you've got to generate this key and then distribute it securely to the different parties that are relying on it. Asymmetric is a little nicer in that regard because you don't have the key management problem. A signer can generate a key pair, a public key and a private key, and sign with a private key and then freely distribute the public key, and any receiver can then verify the claims in the JWT and rely on them using just the public key. There are a number of different algorithms for asymmetric, and you see them listed here. The RS and PS algorithms differ only in the way padding is applied and randomization is applied in the crypto. Some people believe that PS is more secure, and that's probably true. They both RS and PS algorithms in JWT use RSA keys, which you can really easily generate with OpenSSL and other tools. ES refers to elliptic curve cryptography, and it works the same way with a public key and a private key, but they're not RSA keys, they're a little bit different. Which algorithm you choose and whether you choose symmetric or asymmetric depends on your security requirements. It's really beyond the scope of the discussion I'm prepared to give here, but you should know that these are all available in JWT. Now, I want to make some comments about decoding versus verifying signed JWT. So, as I said, the signed JWT includes the header and the payload just in encoded form, not encrypted, which means it's really easy to decode them. And in this screen, you're seeing the way that you might decode a signed JWT, the header and the payload of a signed JWT. So it's really easy to read them. Programs must not rely on unverified claims for security. It's safe to rely on claims only after verifying the signature on the JWT. And to do that, you probably need to rely on a well-known vetted library to do the verification. So just be careful of that. The less common variant, Encrypted JWT, is also based on a related standard, RFC 7516. The claims work exactly the same way. The thing that's different is the payload is encrypted, not encoded, so that a receiver cannot read the claims in a payload unless, surprise, surprise, unless that receiver possesses the decryption key, in which case they can decrypt the entire JWT, or essentially verify the JWT, and what they get out is the decrypted payload. Headers in both signed and encrypted JWT are encoded similarly. And that's important because the receiver needs to kind of see what's in the header in order to figure out how to decrypt the rest of it. So that's why we call it metadata. If you really want something to be private and you're using encrypted JWT, you got to put it in the payload, not in the header. Okay, let's talk about working with JWT. Developers who want to use JWT will probably be relying on a library that's appropriate for their language of choice. So whether you're using C# or Java or Node.js and so on, there are good libraries available. Just Google for them. You're probably not going to want to build your own. You can, and the standard is available. You can just read the standard and go implement it. But that's already been done for you, so you probably want to rely on that. So there's a JWT standard, there's a JWS standard for the signing, and there's a JWE standard for the encryption mechanisms. And all that is public. They're all based on standard algorithms. So it's really straightforward to implement, but somewhat complicated. If you can follow the rules, you can easily do it. Given enough time, but it's already been built for you, so probably rely on the libraries. If you would like to experiment, it helps to have interactive tools that allow you to just kind of play around with JWT. So here's one called JWT.io. It's quite famous. You can paste in a token here, and you can see the claims and so on, the header and the payload. And then you can also verify the signature with different options here. You select the signing algorithm, and you can paste in your keys and verify. So that's pretty nice. I also want sometimes to be able to fiddle around with encrypted JWT. So I wanted to have my own tool to do that. So I've built one. And this is very similar, but basically it also does encrypted JWT. So what that means is you can specify a payload, you can specify the algorithms used for encryption, and then generate a 5-part encrypted JWT. Or if you don't want to do that, you can generate a signed JWT. And let's choose, PS256. And we'll generate that. So all these claims are now encoded here, and there's the signature given this private key and this public key. Really nice tool for experimentation. I can change the key, generate new keys on the fly. I can switch over to elliptic curve algorithms and get keys for that. I can also use symmetric keys and generate that with a password-based key derivation function with a number of iterations and a salt that I specify. So all that is possible within this online tool. It's all free. It does not store secret information or any keys or payloads that you paste in here. So feel free to use that. That'll be nice for just learning JWT and getting the hang of things and checking your work on other libraries and so on. So nice tools, nice interactive tools that I can suggest there for you. Okay, so that's Chapter 2. Chapter 3, let's look at this support within Apogee for JWT and JWS. There are policies today for handling signed JWT. Now, a policy in Apogee is the name of the reusable unit of logic, and there are a bunch of policies in Apogee for things like verifying OAuth tokens or API keys, fiddling with caches, injecting headers, modifying messages, and so on. There are 3 of those policies that deal specifically with JWT, and they are accessible in the policy palette. So I flipped over the Apogee UI. You can see I've got Generate JWT, Verify JWT, and Decode JWT. All of those are right there available for you. When you select one, you can choose the algorithm, the key values, what claims to inject, whether the JWT expires, and if so, what the expiry is, and so on. So really nice capability inside Apogee to generate JWT or verify JWT. That's going to be nice for your API proxies. The support within these policies today is for signed JWT with RSA algorithms, and that's RS and PS algorithms, the elliptic curve algorithms, and the HMAC algorithms. So really nice capability available for you today, has been for some time now. Couple scenarios where you might see JWT inside Apogee being useful for you. A proxy may receive a signed token from, let's say, actions on Google on behalf of a Google Home device. So when you say, okay, Google, talk to Starbucks, I want to order a coffee, that device connects to a Google service, and the Google service will send us a signed JWT to Starbucks in order to assert the identity of the person speaking at the other end. So that's a really nice mechanism for connecting Google smart devices to your services, and Apogee can help with that. An Apogee proxy may also verify a signed token from a client application. So client credentials OAuth grant is a really well-known way to do things. It does require that you send a client ID and secret across the wire. There is a separate proposal, RFC 7523, that describes a way that you can replace that with, rather than sending a secret across the wire, signing a JWT on the client side and sending the JWT across the wire. So not sending a secret, but sending the result of a signature. And the API proxy inside Apogee can verify that JWT, verify the signature, pull out the client ID, and then issue an OAuth token if you desire to have a more secure client credentials grant. So that's a nice capability. We can also do things like POP token initiation in an Apogee proxy. So if that means anything for you, to you, that's also pretty straightforward to do. Or you could wrap an OpenID Connect sign-in on top of an older identity system that does not support OIDC. So all those are good scenarios, and there are many more. Lots of customers using JWT today in Apogee. Apogee also supports JWS. So there are 3 policies for handling those, very similar to the JWT policies. They support the same algorithms. JWS is just the more general case of signing, so your payload does not need to be JSON. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. And this would support things like signing images or any byte stream that isn't necessarily in JSON format. And JWS inside Apogee you can do detached content, which is a nice optimization mechanism, so you can have signatures that are detached from whatever it is that you're signing. So that's today. You have all that available to you. Coming soon in Apogee, you'll see policies for encrypted JWT, which will also be nice. If you have the need to handle encrypted JWT today, either generating or verifying, and you can't wait for those built-in policies, you can use an available community-contributed Java callout to do that kind of thing, and that's available for you today. So JWT is just one of the security-related standards that Apogee supports today. Apogee proxies can also handle SAML, AES encryption, RSA encryption, bare HMAC, XML, digital signatures, and a bunch of other ones. Customers use Apogee for a number of different security-related things. Sometimes they combine some of these with the JWT, and all that's available for you. Listen, if you have any questions about JWT, JWS, their use within Apogee proxies, how the policies work, best practices for applying them, or any of the other security protocols, a good place to go is the community. Visit community.apogee.com, sign in, post a question. there are smart people that monitor the community and are interested and willing to help you out. So give us a good question, and we'll talk it through with you. And that's all I got today. So I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.